Ottawa, Canada's capital, it's the Computer Podcast. Hello, I'm your host, Norman Jack. With me, my co-host, George Valenzuela. George, another week under our belt.
Absolutely, Norm. How are things?
Very well, thank you. Hope things are keeping well over the Valenzuela household these days. And with us today, our special guest again, Paul Middleveen from the Trailing Edge, tte.ca here in Ottawa. Good morning, Paul. How are you doing?
Good morning. Thank you. I'm doing very well.
Good to hear from you. Lots of things in the news today. A couple of security issues that have come to light in the last little while. First of all, TikTok, that ubiquitous, I guess it's a teenage type or younger person type of app that every young person seems to use these days. Sending out cute little videos of what they're doing and their pets and all that sort of stuff. Coming under renewed scrutiny because of what it's allowing itself to do, even when it's not running. Now, George, this is an interesting time for it to be coming under criticism because, TikTok has always done this. Many other apps have this problem too. Mm-hmm. I guess because it's owned by a Chinese company and everybody's concerned that the Chinese government is going to start accessing the data that it stores on its servers, even if they are supposedly servers located in the United States. But as you have mentioned before, this is not unique to TikTok.
Right. So what we're talking about here is that TikTok just happens to be the largest, most well-known app in this list of apps. But what it's doing is it's accessing and copying from the clipboard. So it could be triggered by a keystroke. It could be triggered just on a time basis every X number of seconds. It actually pulls data out of the clipboard and is doing something with it, right? It's just aware of it. I don't know if it's we don't know what it's doing, obviously, but it is being aware and pulling this data, and it doesn't need to, obviously. There's no reason why TikTok or any other app that isn't an app that clearly states, I need to use the clipboard, should ever be accessing the clipboard. And it becomes even more risky on Apple devices because of the universal clipboard that's shared between Apple devices, be it a laptop, a computer, or a phone. So even if I have my phone, I'm not using it, it's sitting off to the side, and I'm on my laptop and I'm doing work. If I'm typing in a password or I'm typing a letter to my boss or I'm sharing confidential files, it's accessing that clipboard from the computer, from the phone app, even though I'm not using it. So it's very scary. And this came to light quite a while ago. TikTok was reprimanded. They said they fixed it. It was a faulty SDK that they were using. And recently, iOS 14, the beta of iOS 14, has a feature that everybody is loving because it's bringing this to light, where it alerts you as soon as, in real time, as soon as an app has accessed the clipboard. And you can see videos online where somebody's typing a comment into Instagram and the little notification bar on the top is just constantly pinging saying, this app has grabbed the clipboard. This app has grabbed the clipboard over and over and over again as you're typing text in, and it's pretty scary.
Yeah. Now, some security experts that I've heard from in the last little while are saying, well, you should really, when you install an app, check the permissions, go through the permissions, just don't blindly accept them all before you install an app. But I guess a lot of the problem is there's no specific permission, it says, to copy stuff from the clipboard, for example. And in many cases, if you don't accept all the conditions, it won't allow you to install the app.
Well, that's it, right? I know that Android has been going into the area where they would like to be able to selectively allow apps to have permissions based on whatever user preferences there are, at the time that you're installing it. But some apps just won't work. A camera app isn't going to work if you don't give it access to your camera.
Yeah.
It's just not going to work, right? So there's certain things that are mandatory and required, other things that might be optional. But what you have to really look out for is apps that are very clearly not requiring specific permissions, asking for and demanding that permission. You really have to turn around and say, do I want to install this app? I know TikTok is very popular and it's very difficult to say no, but if TikTok says, I need access to your camera, your contacts, your clipboard, your this, your that, your storage, everything, your phone numbers, really? I mean, all I'm doing is sharing pictures. I understand you need access to my camera and maybe my contacts to ask other people to join TikTok, but above and beyond that, what is the real reason why you would need access to a clipboard or to, so you have to really watch out for these kind of apps, and they run the gamut from malicious to just an app that wants as many permissions as possible to have information and then sell it, not necessarily in a security reason, but just gathering stuff to put a profile out on you and to understand your ad serving needs, and then they sell that to ad companies to target ads. So really just be aware of what you're installing.
Yeah, exactly. Now, this brings up another incident that's occurred over the last, 2.5 months now, is the contact tracing app that the government of Alberta has put out to help keep an eye on coronavirus cases developing in that province. Apparently is leaving iPhone users wide open to issues because the app won't work unless your iPhone is actually running and unlocked.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. So how many? Yeah, exactly. Now, that being said, there are probably some younger generation people who, that might fit right into their profile. They might be on their phone 80% of the time, and it's actually unlocked and they're using it. But the vast majority of users are going to have their phone in their back pocket. It's going to be locked, or if they're listening to music, they're not necessarily watching the phone. And the fact that an app that is meant to be something that is collecting data in the background
and anonymously,
right, based on your location and proximity to other phones sharing the same app, the requirement for both of those phones to be active and unlocked. Active, I understand, it should be powered on naturally, but unlocked, it doesn't make any sense to me. That's just bad design. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you put your iPhone down and it gets swiped, or you lose it, if it's unlocked, it's wide open to anybody who grabs it.
Exactly. And to avoid having to unlock it every 30 seconds, you just disable locking it, which is completely insecure and completely not recommended by anybody with any sense whatsoever. So it doesn't make any sense.
Well, officials in Alberta say that they're working to update that, but, it's not like they haven't known there was a problem. This was first raised in the middle of June, a month ago now, and there's still no solution. I'd be real careful if I was in Alberta and had this app on my iPhone. That's for sure. Well, one of the other things in the news, of course, it looks like that massive Windows update, I think it was numbered 2004, that came out earlier this year, full of problems. But Paul, it looks like they've finally got most of them solved. Are you finding that people are coming in now with fewer cases of the Windows 10 blues these days?
Well, yes and no. I mean, we had that update that came out in May that messed up some people's user profiles and some networking settings. And now this 2004, we've actually had quite a few customers coming in where their printer was working great yesterday, and now it just doesn't print. And very weird and interesting errors. It would still use the legacy style programming, so you could go back to the Windows 7 style screen or go into, say, Paint, and you could still print. And if you use the newer Windows 10 printing app in the same program to launch it, it wouldn't work at all. So some interesting errors, as you say, from the 2004 update. Definitely, most of them have seemed to have gone away. We were working with some of our clients, trying to do remote assistance and getting various companies' printers working was quite the interesting task. And in many cases, we just had to revert that update, and magically everything started working again. We have seen some patches coming out and have applied some of those, and now it doesn't seem to be affecting their scanning or their printing anymore. So definitely, it looks like Microsoft has been working hard at trying to resolve these issues. But we are still seeing some network connectivity issues with this patch as well, where one computer on the entire network can all of a sudden cause your network traffic to just crash.
Wow.
And again, we revert that update and it starts working again. This one we've been trying to debug. We don't know what's causing it right now.
All right, on to the topic for this week, peripherals. What are your favorite peripherals for increasing the usability of your computer, both desktop and laptop computers as well? Everybody has peripherals. I think, it's one of those things where it's so easy these days to modularize your computer to make it fit exactly what you want it to do. George, what's your favorite peripherals that you have installed on your computers these days?
I have laptops, tablets, phones, and regular desktop computers at home. And for my laptop, I have like the holy trinity of peripherals.
Oh
I
yeah.
spend 90% of my computing time is on this laptop. Okay, I insist on always having the three best peripherals possible for this. It's a monitor, an external monitor that you can adjust height wise, right, for your situation. So that gives me the ability to use two monitors. Again, for my line of work, it's nice to have separate screens.
Yeah.
I must insist on always having an external keyboard and mouse, right? So you can buy an ergonomic keyboard. You can, again, it's away from the laptop, the keyboard and mouse. You can buy any kind of mouse you want, any kind of keyboard you want. I consider that the same peripheral. And the third one is probably the one that makes the biggest difference, if you can believe it, is I like to have my laptop on a stand. So I don't have it beneath my monitor. I don't have it beside the monitor because it's on the desk level and I can raise the monitor. So I buy like a little stand for the laptop where it can kind of go up and down on an angle, and I can adjust the height of it. I can adjust the monitor opening or closing and the angles like that. So I find it's the most ergonomic, and just makes me the most comfortable working with it for 7, 8, 9 hours a day. Without those things, when I'm forced to use my laptop keyboard and trackpad and the monitor itself, I find I have to take very, very frequent breaks. I just get sore back. I'm more hunched. My eyes are more strained because I'm constantly switching between apps as opposed to just looking from one monitor to the other. So I find those three are my three must-have peripherals for any laptop that I have.
Now, Paul, that's an excellent idea, using an external monitor for a laptop. And essentially, you're turning the laptop into a processing unit. I've got one here as well. How big do you need one?
How big do you need a monitor?
Yeah, how big are you going to have it before it gets maybe too big?
Wall to wall.
Well,
like, you're not going to go out and buy a 64-inch screen TV and turn it into a monitor. But, what is it now? 24 inches? Is that a good size?
Yeah, I find a lot of people do prefer the 24-inch over the 22s, especially now. But in terms of size, I do find that the sweet spot is between about a 27 and about a 34-inch.
Oh, really?
Depending on how far away you're sitting from your desk, especially the newer curved monitors, 32 to 37s maybe pushing it. But I do find a lot of people are asking for in that 27 to 34-inch range. A lot of the newer curved monitors are the QLEDs. The ones that have the hue lighting on them as well.
Yes.
And I do find that that's really been helping me too. I like having the hue lighting. It certainly makes the headaches less as well. Easier to read the screen, easier to concentrate. You don't have to get a monitor with hue lighting as well. Actually got a nice little unit that sits on my desk, and you can change the coloring. It certainly makes me feel better when I'm sitting in the office, for sure.
Yeah. Now, what about your favorite peripherals? Obviously, you like the idea of the external screen too, and the larger sized ones. What else are key for what you do?
I'm sort of in the same area there. I like to have the external keyboards. I do find if you're working for many hours, I'd prefer to have the full-size keyboard and mouse, of course. Again, with my eyesight and depending on where you're working and how you travel, I love the backlit features on both keyboards and I guess side top lit features on some of the mice that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
The mouse, I don't really need the lights on it unless, I'm getting some R&R and trying to get some gaming in.
Yeah.
The backlit keyboard certainly does help. And there's a lot out there. And you can get them for pretty cheap. I think starting prices are about $35 and then working their way up from there.
One of the things that I like to have as a peripheral is very simply a USB port expander. I never seem to have enough ports to plug things into these days. So, even a four-place port seems to be a pretty handy thing for me to have. And I like external drives too. I like to make my computer last as long as possible. And especially with my laptop, there's no real way to upgrade storage capacity. We've talked in recent weeks about making sure that if you do have a laptop or even a desktop, that your initial drive be solid state because it's so fast and so reliable. But let's face it, if you're storing a lot of videos or you're storing large music files or anything like that, get yourself a really good docking station that you can slide some drives into. USB 3 connectability, of course, if you can cope with that, and plug those in as well. It just seems to me the easiest way and the simplest way to swap extra drives in and out as you need them.
And it's great that you mentioned that. I didn't even think of that when you were talking about monitors. A lot of monitors have USB hubs built into them.
Yes.
And that's actually a feature that I find almost must have now, to have those extra USB ports right off the panel.
Is it too late then to say that my private home cloud is a peripheral? Because I use that instead of an external drive. I guess that's not the same thing, is it? Okay.
And that is another accessory that I use a lot as well. We have our home server, right? And have your Plex and media server. So.
Exactly.
Now that you're using, I guess, what you might call leftover computer equipment for putting together a server on a desktop that may be a little older or something like that, and just lying around not doing anything?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yep, exactly.
I mean, depending on what type of videos and things or what you're using the server for, you may need to upgrade that. If it's going to be streaming 4K video, maybe that old dual core just won't do it. But in many cases, yeah, that's what I think a lot of us hobbyist enthusiasts do. Just get the older peripherals, slap them together, and let's see if we can make some type of media machine for it.
Now, George, what sort of software do you use on your home server or cloud?
So my one of choice is called FreeNAS. I think it's built off of a Unix variant. I'm trying to remember the name of BSD. So it's an open source software. They come up with lots of patches. It's got all sorts of abilities to launch like small VMs. They call them jails. You can build your own servers. So I have a Plex server, as Paul was mentioning, to stream audio and video feeds, share pictures across all the users. You can set up shares for each person in the house, so that when they turn on their computer, be it a Mac or Windows or a Linux computer, you can automatically connect through Windows sharing, SMB, NFS, Apple Share. You can set it up as a Time Machine Apple backup. You can set it up as a regular backup server. It's so flexible, it's crazy. You just log into it as if it was a terminal server. It runs in my basement, kind of in the corner. It's got a nice little RAID array on it. I got about, I think, a total of 6 or 7 terabytes across, 5 or 6 drives. And it's just always sitting there nicely. The one thing I should probably do now is get a battery backup for it, because every time the power goes out, I have to go back and restart it, and I'm worried I'm going to ruin something. There's a couple of little things here and there, but it's been working great for the past, I think, almost 2 years now. It's fantastic. Wow. So I have my own little private cloud. I tell people that, and they still say, "Why would you do that?" It's like, well, I mean, why not?
That's right. Put that unused stuff to good use. Let's just quickly talk about some of the ergonomics, because George, you were talking about it earlier. When you go out and get a mouse, should you actually try it out? Should you put it in your hand and see how it moves around? I have one that is curved a specific way. The best mouse I've ever owned. I would never go back to just a plain mouse again. George? Mm-hmm.
Yes, for sure. A lot of mice. They look really nice. But, after an hour or two of using it, you notice the tightness in your thumb. Your forearm starts to get a little bit sore. A lot of times you can kind of self-adjust by moving the mouse a little bit to the left or the right, depending on if you're left or right-handed. Even moving the level of your chair up or down somewhat, moving it farther or deeper in the desk or closer to you. A lot of that can help mitigate some of the ergonomic differences. But for sure, if the mouse is not comfortable just holding it right there in the store, I wouldn't even consider buying it. It would have to be something that is comfortable, at least in my hand, right? Yeah. By default.
Well, one suggestion I'm going to make regarding keyboards, and this is something that I dealt with at work many years ago when I started developing carpal tunnel syndrome. Get a desk where you can angle the keyboard downwards and away from you a bit. Now, if you hold out your arm straight and look at it, you'll notice that your hand naturally bends a bit at the wrist. Okay? Mm-hmm. And if you hold it out, that's the way your keyboard should be attacked. Now, in most cases, you can't do that because keyboards are horizontal. That forces your wrist up a bit as you're typing. That's an unnatural position. I have a desk where the center section can be moved up and down, but it can also be tilted. And I always tilt it away from me a bit so that the keyboard is on a bit of a downward slant. The problem went away. It's never bothered me again. Well, that's all the time we've got for the show today. My thanks to our special guest, Paul Middelveen, for being available with us this week. Paul, hopefully we'll talk to you next week.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And don't forget, you can get us on YouTube. Just check out our channel, The Computer Podcast. We also stream on many of the podcast channels as well. You can check out our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Computer Podcast. And don't forget, you can email us suggestions or questions to our email address as well, thecomputerpodcast@gmail.com. And, of course, keep up to date with all we're talking about on the show on our blog. Thecomputerpodcast.com is the place to go to that. George, we'll see you next week, sir.
We'll see you, Norm.
And we'll see you next week on the Computer Podcast. Interesting programming.